I sat in the glass-walled HR office at Northvale Consulting as Martin Doyle leaned back in his leather chair. His cold smile made my stomach twist. Two managers flanked him, smirking behind coffee cups. "Eduardo, I'll be direct," Martin said. "You'll never be promoted here. You don't have the right executive presence." The words hit like a physical blow. My chest tightened, heat rushing to my face. 3 years of perfect reviews and overtime meant nothing to these people. The air in the room suddenly felt thick and suffocating. I fought back tears. The managers exchanged knowing glances, one chuckling. Martin's smile widened, enjoying my humiliation like a predator savoring wounded prey. "I see," I whispered. "That's all, Eduardo. Return to your cubicle." I stood and walked to the door. As it clicked shut, I heard muffled laughter echoing behind me. My career dreams had just died in that sterile room, crushed beneath their casual cruelty. I drove home in silence, Martin's words echoing, "You'll never be promoted here." Was it my background? My accent? The way I didn't play their political games or kiss their rings? My apartment felt suffocating. Bills covered the coffee table, Dad's hospital costs, student loans, rent. My family counted on me to break the cycle of poverty. I replayed every interaction with management. Had I missed some unspoken rule? Some secret handshake or insider knowledge that separated the chosen from the forgotten? The injustice made my hands shake. I'd worked harder than anyone, yet none of it mattered. My phone buzzed, Mom asking about Dad's treatment payment. I stared until tears blurred my vision. Something inside hardened into steel, forged by humiliation into something unbreakable. I would never let anyone degrade me like that again. 2 weeks later, I entered Martin's office with a resignation letter. He looked up, probably expecting me to beg for another chance or grovel for forgiveness. "This is my resignation," I said, placing it on his desk. "Friday is my last day." His eyebrows shot up. "Eduardo, don't make rash decisions. Maybe we can find a lateral move somewhere else in the organization." "No thank you. I've decided." Office gossip spread theories. Poor Eduardo gave up. Only Dana knew the truth. I'd been accepted to graduate school for accounting and forensic auditing with full scholarship funding. "Are you sure?" Dana asked over coffee, concern etched in her features. "Tougher than staying here 20 years being treated like garbage while watching incompetent people get promoted based on connections rather than merit?" She nodded, understanding completely the toxic culture we'd both endured for too long. Graduate school was brutal. I worked 3 jobs while maintaining full course loads. My diet, ramen and campus-free food. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford most nights. Classmates had parents funding their education. They partied while I tutored for grocery money. They networked at expensive restaurants while I counted pennies for bus fare home. Every time exhaustion threatened, I remembered Martin's smug face. That glass office became my fuel, burning bright whenever motivation wavered. Professors noticed my dedication. While others coasted on talent, I survived on determination. I asked more questions, spent longer in libraries, pushed myself beyond every limit. Forensic auditing fascinated me most. Learning to follow money trails felt like solving puzzles. I had a gift for spotting inconsistencies others missed completely. 2 years later, summa cum laude masters. 6 months, CPA license. 6 months more, certified fraud examiner. The dismissed analyst had become a trained investigator with dangerous skills and unwavering purpose. My first job was Fletcher & Associates, a respected auditing firm. They valued my detail focus and willingness to tackle complex cases others avoided like the plague. My breakthrough came month 3. I audited a manufacturing company 3 senior auditors had cleared. Something felt wrong about their inventory reports, numbers that didn't quite add up properly. I spent a weekend examining every transaction. Finally found it: phantom inventory systematically overstated for months. The discrepancy was cleverly hidden behind legitimate-looking paperwork. "How did you catch this?" the managing partner asked. 3 people reviewed these books. Sometimes focus on what's missing instead of what's there. Empty spaces tell stories too. Word spread about the new hire who prevented a major lawsuit. My reputation was established. Clients specifically requested me for their most sensitive audits. Over the following year, I built an impressive track record uncovering discrepancies seasoned auditors missed, earning respect through competence rather than politics. My supervisor approached with a thick folder that would change everything. His expression was serious, almost reverent as he handled the documents. "Eduardo, we landed a major client," he said. "Northvale Consulting needs comprehensive financial audit. Your lead auditor." My heart stopped. Northvale Consulting, the company that had destroyed my confidence years earlier. Fate had a twisted sense of humor and perfect timing. I opened the folder with steady hands, though shaking inside. Financial statements, executive bios, all from where Martin Doyle still sat destroying lives with impunity. This is significant opportunity. They have regulatory compliance issues, so we need our best people. Ready for something this big? Absolutely. When do we start? That night, I stared at Northvale files spread across my table. After 4 years rebuilding myself, fate had delivered perfect justice opportunity wrapped in legal documentation. Martin had no idea what storm was coming, carried on winds of professional competence and personal vendetta intertwined. The morning of my return, I selected my finest suit. Standing in my bathroom mirror, I remembered last walking through those doors, broken and humiliated, tail between my legs. Today was different. I entered as Eduardo Rivera, CPA, CFE, lead auditor. My business card represented real authority now, backed by credentials and legal power they couldn't dismiss. Conference Room A, where executives made decisions affecting hundreds. I arrived early, setting up laptop and files with precision, claiming the space as my own territory. At 9 o'clock, Martin entered first. His confident stride faltered, completely recognizing my face. Color drained from his cheeks like someone had opened a valve. "Good morning, Mr. Doyle," I said professionally. "I'm Eduardo Rivera from Fletcher & Associates. I'll be conducting your financial audit." His hand felt cold and clammy. Behind him, other executives filed in, including the managers for my humiliation. They recognized me, smugness replaced by uncertainty and growing alarm. "Eduardo Rivera," Martin repeated slowly. "I had no idea you'd become an auditor. Life takes interesting turns. Shall we begin?" The power dynamic had completely reversed, and everyone in the room could feel the shift in gravitational pull. Martin desperately tried regaining control, using that same condescending tone I remembered like a scar across my memory. "This audit is routine, isn't it?" he said with forced casualness. "Standard compliance. Should be wrapped up in a week." Other executives nodded eagerly, hoping I'd agree to keep things simple. They wanted me to rubber stamp their books and disappear quickly without causing trouble. I pulled out thick audit procedures. "Actually, this will be comprehensive examination of your financial controls. Based on preliminary assessment, we'll need 6 full weeks minimum." Martin's jaw tightened. 6 weeks? That seems excessive. Surely an experienced auditor could complete this faster with proper efficiency. "I am experienced. That's why I know proper due diligence requires time. We'll examine 3 years of data, test controls, and interview personnel across departments." Uncomfortable silence. One manager shifted nervously. They realized this wouldn't be the quick review they'd expected or hoped for. I'll need access to all accounts, statements, and records for 36 months. When can you have those ready for my team's review? By week's end, I'd identified several red flags. The consultant payment ledger was concerning, irregular amounts to vendors I couldn't verify anywhere in public records. I cross-referenced payments with tax records and incorporation documents. Half the consulting companies receiving payments didn't exist as legitimate businesses anywhere I could trace. Payment amounts were structured just under thresholds triggering automatic reviews. Someone had planned this to avoid detection by regulatory oversight mechanisms designed to catch fraud. During lunch, I called my supervisor from the parking garage. I think we've discovered something significant. Consulting payments have serious irregularities. Someone's moving money through shell companies systematically. How confident are you? Confident enough to recommend digging deeper. This could be much bigger than simple compliance issues. We might be looking at systematic fraud here. You have whatever support needed. If there's fraud, we need to uncover the full extent. That afternoon, I requested additional documentation. Staff seemed nervous, exchanging worried glances. Word was spreading that the new auditor asked uncomfortable questions and wouldn't accept surface answers. Martin appeared at the conference room door. Finding everything in order? That evening, working late, Martin's assistant knocked. She handed me a box of files with an apologetic smile that seemed genuine enough. Mr. Doyle asked me to bring these additional records. He thought they might be helpful for your comprehensive review process. I thanked her and waited until she left before examining contents. Bank statements and expense reports, but something felt wrong, fundamentally off about the documentation. Dates didn't match my requested sequence, and transaction amounts had been whited out and retyped. The alterations were subtle but unmistakable to trained eyes accustomed to spotting deception. I photographed suspicious pages, comparing them to digital records from earlier. The discrepancies were glaring: altered dates, missing transactions, duplicate entries that didn't exist in originals. Martin was sabotaging my audit with falsified information, hoping I'd make errors discrediting my findings. Clever strategy, except he was dealing with someone trained to spot financial deception professionally. I documented every discrepancy, noting delivery time and manner. This wasn't just accounting fraud anymore, it was obstruction of official audit with criminal implications. Instead of confronting Martin immediately, I decided to remain quiet and observe what other desperate tricks he might attempt to derail my investigation. Next morning, Dana waited by the elevator. She worked in middle management now, earned through dedication I remembered from our early friendship days. "Eduardo," she whispered nervously. "Can we talk privately?" We found an empty break room. Dana closed the door carefully, checking twice to ensure we weren't overheard by anyone who might report back. "I heard you're conducting our audit. I can't believe you came back after what they did. Sometimes life brings you where you need to be. How have things been for you here in recent years?" She hesitated, then leaned closer. "That's what I wanted to discuss. Something's been wrong here for a while. I've been scared to speak up, but since you're here conducting official business." She paused, checking the door. "I've observed things that don't make sense. Irregular payments, hushed conversations about money going to wrong places, meetings that end abruptly when others approach." My pulse quickened. "What specific things?" "Expense reports that make no sense. Travel receipts for trips that never happened. And Martin's been acting paranoid, especially since your audit started last week." Dana showed me a phone photo. "Found this in a conference room after a partner meeting. It's a bank routing number I don't recognize from our official accounts." Dana's photographed routing number led to my biggest breakthrough. Using professional database access, I traced it to an offshore Cayman Islands account registered under North Valley Holdings LLC. The corporate structure deliberately hid true ownership through multiple shell company layers. With patience and investigative tools, I began unraveling the complex web of financial deception. North Valley Holdings was owned by another shell company, owned by another, creating a confusing chain through 3 countries and 5 entities designed to obscure money trails. Finally, I discovered the smoking gun. The ultimate beneficiary was a trust controlled by Hamilton Price, a senior Northvale partner. The same partner present during my original reviews who'd nodded when Martin explained why people like me weren't executive material based on invisible criteria. The offshore account had received over $2.3 million in transfers from Northvale's consulting accounts over 3 years. Money that should have paid legitimate expenses had been diverted to Hamilton's personal fund. I spent the weekend building comprehensive timelines, correlating transfers with internal memos and board minutes from my audit requests, creating an unbreakable chain of evidence. The pattern was clear: after every major client payment, calculated percentages were skimmed and sent offshore within 48 hours like clockwork. By Sunday night, I had enough evidence to destroy them both completely and send them to federal prison. Monday morning, Martin cornered me in the hallway. His polished appearance showed cracks, crooked tie, dark circles shadowing his eyes like bruises from sleepless nights. "Eduardo, we need a private conversation," he said urgently. "Step into my office." I followed him to that same glass room where he'd destroyed my dreams. He closed the door, expression harder than ever, desperation creeping around the edges. "I know what you think you're discovering, but you're making a serious mistake. If you keep digging into matters that don't concern you, you'll ruin your career again. This time, there won't be any comeback possible." Overwhelming déjà vu. Here he was again, trying to intimidate me into silence. But I wasn't the desperate analyst who needed his approval anymore or feared his threats. "Mr. Doyle, I'm conducting legitimate audit according to professional standards. If you have concerns about my methodology, contact my supervisor at Fletcher & Associates." His face flushed red. "Don't play games with me. People like you don't survive by making enemies of people like me. You should have learned that lesson the first time around." I met his stare without flinching. The only lesson I learned was never letting bullies define my self-worth. "Anything else regarding the audit that requires discussion?" That afternoon, Dana slipped me a flash drive during a brief parking garage encounter. Her hands shook as she pressed the device into mine with obvious fear. "This contains internal emails going back 2 years. I've been collecting them whenever I had executive server access. There are conversations between Martin and Hamilton about moving money, creating false vendor records, and covering up discrepancies systematically." I tucked the drive securely into my jacket. "Dana, if anyone discovers you took these files, I understand the risk completely. But I can't stay silent while they steal from the company and destroy people's lives. These emails prove Martin has been covering up embezzlement for years while ruining careers of honest employees." That night, I loaded the drive onto an isolated laptop used for sensitive work. What I discovered exceeded my worst expectations about their criminal conspiracy and moral bankruptcy. Email threads discussed targeting employees for layoffs to reduce scrutiny. Plans to alter audit trails and destroy incriminating records. Even conversations about discrediting whistleblowers by destroying professional reputations through false accusations. One chain made my blood boil. Martin and Hamilton discussing my original termination in cold, calculating terms. "The Rivera situation is resolved. Made it clear he'll never advance. These people need to understand their place in the hierarchy and stay there." They'd targeted me specifically as a potential threat to their comfortable corruption, destroying my career preemptively to protect their criminal enterprise. Next morning brought tense atmosphere in the conference room. Martin was there with Hamilton Price and 2 other partners, expressions ranging from annoyed to openly hostile toward my presence. "Eduardo," Hamilton said without preamble, "we've decided this audit has continued long enough. We're satisfied with preliminary findings and would like to conclude by week's end." I pulled out my detailed timeline. Actually, I'm reaching the most critical phase. I still need to examine offshore banking relationships and consultant payment authorizations before drawing any conclusions. The temperature dropped 10 degrees. Martin's face went ashen while Hamilton's jaw clenched visibly, muscles working beneath skin. That won't be necessary. We're confident in our compliance procedures. That decision isn't yours to make. Fletcher and Associates contracted for comprehensive audit, and professional standards require proper completion regardless of your personal preferences or timeline concerns. Martin leaned forward. Be reasonable. You found no major issues. Why create problems where none exist? Have I found no major issues? Because I have questions about North Valley Holdings and other consulting entities that don't appear in business directories or public records anywhere. Deafening silence. Hamilton and Martin exchanged a look confirming everything I suspected about their guilt and complicity. The partners will vote on continuing this audit. But I'd heard whispers about compliance board override authority that would trump their desperate attempts at damage control. That night, I discovered my car with both mirrors smashed and a long scratch down the side. A threatening note under my windshield: mind your own business or else face consequences. I photographed everything and called police to file a report. The officer seemed skeptical about work connections but documented properly, taking my statement with professional detachment. My hands trembled driving home, checking mirrors frequently. This wasn't just professional retaliation anymore. Someone was willing to escalate to property destruction and implied threats of physical violence. I called my supervisor. They're trying to intimidate me into backing down. The evidence must be more damaging than I realized to provoke this desperate response. Do you feel safe continuing? I thought about Martin's smug face, the emails Dana risked everything for, millions stolen from legitimate operations while honest employees suffered layoffs and pay cuts. I'm not backing down. But we need to document everything more carefully and possibly involve law enforcement sooner rather than later for everyone's safety. Agreed. I'm Kanta. The face of intimidation. Next morning brought devastating news. Dana had been suspended immediately. According to official announcement, she was under investigation for misconduct and data security violations, obvious retaliation disguised as policy enforcement. I found her in the lobby carrying personal belongings. Her eyes were red but her jaw set with determination that reminded me of my own resolve. They know I helped you, she said quietly. Martin called me in this morning and accused me of stealing confidential files. He said I was terminated for cause, which means no severance, no references, nothing but humiliation. My guilt was overwhelming. I'm so sorry. I never wanted you hurt because you helped uncover truth and expose their criminal behavior. She turned to face me, expression fierce despite tears. Don't apologize for doing the right thing. These people have been stealing and lying for years while destroying honest employees' lives. If I lose my job exposing crimes, that's a price I'm willing to pay for justice. Watching her drive away, I realized Martin's strategy. He was systematically silencing anyone who might help me, isolating me from allies and witnesses through fear and economic intimidation. The message was obvious: this happens to people who cross us or help our enemies. I spent that day alone reviewing files, ensuring everything was backed up in multiple secure locations beyond their reach. That evening, I stored copies in a safe deposit box across town, creating an insurance policy they couldn't destroy or suppress. By Thursday, I'd reached a crucial decision. The audit was uncovering criminal fraud, but perpetrators were obstructing my investigation and retaliating against witnesses with increasing desperation and violence. Professional channels moved too slowly while evidence was potentially being destroyed. I contacted Brenda Kilk, a financial journalist I'd worked with previously. She specialized in white-collar crime and had an excellent reputation protecting confidential sources from retaliation. I have a story that might interest you. Multi-million-dollar embezzlement at a mid-sized consulting firm. Offshore accounts, shell companies, systematic fraud designed to steal from legitimate business operations. How solid is your evidence? Solid enough that they're vandalizing my car and firing employees who cooperate. I can't share everything due to client confidentiality, but I can point you toward right directions for independent research and verification. That weekend, Brenda's preliminary article appeared online, local consulting firm under investigation for financial irregularities. She couldn't name Northvale directly, but anyone familiar with Denver business could read between lines. The article mentioned offshore accounts, suspicious payments, and retaliation against whistleblowers. By Monday, the story had been shared hundreds of times across social media platforms, creating pressure. My phone buzzed constantly with journalist calls. The pressure was building exactly as hoped, forcing them into defensive positions. Martin's intimidation attempt had backfired spectacularly, drawing unwanted media attention to their criminal activities and creating public scrutiny they couldn't control or suppress. Mounting pressure was getting to Martin. During Tuesday's board meeting where I presented preliminary findings, he finally cracked completely under accumulated stress and public attention. The meeting started normally, Hamilton attempting to maintain control and minimize my discoveries. But when I began explaining North Valley Holdings' connection, Martin exploded with uncontrolled rage. "This is ridiculous," he shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "You're trying to destroy this company based on bookkeeping errors and meaningless coincidences." Hamilton shot him a warning look, but Martin was beyond caring about subtle signals or maintaining professional appearances in front of witnesses. "Those consulting payments are legitimate business expenses. Just because you can't understand our accounting methods doesn't mean we're criminals." I remained calm, continuing my presentation while Martin's rant grew increasingly unhinged. He was revealing knowledge he shouldn't have about offshore accounts and shell company structures, incriminating himself further. "Mr. Doyle, how do you know specific details of North Valley Holdings' account structure? That information wasn't included in any documents you provided during this audit process." Dead silence. Martin's face went from red to white realizing what he'd revealed. Hamilton looked like he wanted to disappear through the floor immediately. "I was just speaking generally about procedures," Martin stammered. Too late. For board members and 2 attorneys heard him demonstrate intimate knowledge of accounts that weren't supposed to exist in their official records. My formal board presentation the following week was a forensic accounting masterpiece. I methodically walked them through 3 years of systematic fraud, showing how Martin and Hamilton had stolen over $2.3 million through elaborate shell company schemes designed to hide their crimes. Evidence was laid out in meticulous detail: bank transfers, altered documents, false vendor records, and Dana's internal emails. The offshore account trail was mapped completely, showing exactly how money had been moved and hidden from legitimate oversight. The board sat in stunned silence as I explained how fraud had been concealed. Fake consulting contracts, manipulated expense reports, and careful timing to avoid regulatory reviews. Sophisticated white-collar crime executed by people who understood the system well enough to exploit it ruthlessly. The total amount stolen is $2,347,892, not including interest and penalties from tax authorities. This represents approximately 8% of reported consulting revenue over 3 years, money stolen from legitimate business operations. Board Chairman Wilson cleared his throat. "What are your recommendations for immediate action?" "First, revoke all financial system access for involved individuals. Second, contact law enforcement immediately for criminal proceedings. Third, engage additional forensic accountants to determine if fraud extends further back in time or involves additional perpetrators." The implications were staggering. Northvale's reputation was destroyed, financial statements required restatement, and multiple regulatory agencies would launch investigations that could destroy the company entirely. Hamilton and Martin had built their fraud assuming no one would look closely enough to discover it or have the courage to expose them. Hamilton's counterattack came swiftly next morning. He'd hired a prestigious law firm overnight, claiming the entire audit was motivated by personal vendetta rather than professional duty and objective analysis. Mr. Rivera was terminated from this company years ago, his expensive attorney argued. His findings are clearly the result of a disgruntled former employee seeking revenge against previous supervisors who made legitimate business decisions. Boardroom tension was thick as Hamilton painted me as an unreliable narrator with a personal axe to grind. He questioned my credentials, suggested my evidence was fabricated, and implied Fletcher and Associates had been negligent assigning me to this sensitive audit given my personal history. How can we trust the objectivity of someone told he would never be promoted here? This investigation is tainted by personal bias and professional incompetence rather than legitimate forensic analysis. I could see doubt flickering across some board members' faces. Clever strategy, discredit the messenger to avoid dealing with the damaging message. The old Eduardo might have been destroyed by this calculated attack on credibility. But I'd spent 4 years preparing for exactly this moment. I stood calmly and opened my briefcase with steady hands, ready to deliver the killing blow. Mr. Price raises an interesting point about motivation, I said. Let me share additional evidence that addresses his concerns about objectivity and demonstrates the criminal nature of your activities. The room held its breath as I pulled out Dana's flash drive and thick email printouts that would destroy their defense completely. The internal emails were devastating. I read them chronologically, showing the board exactly how fraud had evolved from small diversions to sophisticated multi-million-dollar operations designed to systematically steal company resources. Email from Hamilton Price to Martin Doyle, March 15, 3 years ago. Quote, the North Valley account is set up and ready. Start with small transfers to test the system. We need to be careful not to trigger automatic reviews or regulatory attention. Board members leaned forward as I continued through damning evidence. Email after email showing premeditation, planning, and deliberate criminal intent rather than innocent mistakes or misunderstandings. Email from Martin Doyle to Hamilton Price, June 3, 2 years ago, accounting flagged consulting payments as unusual. I told them it was special project authorized by senior management. Might need to clean house if they keep asking questions about our activities. One board member audibly gasped. These weren't accounting errors, they were calculated crimes committed by people in positions of trust while betraying their fiduciary responsibilities. I saved the most damaging for last. Email from Hamilton Price to Martin Doyle, August 12, last year. The Rivera problem is solved. Made it clear he'll never advance here. These people need to understand their place. Now we can focus on bigger transfers without troublemakers interfering with our operations. Deafening silence followed. Everyone understood my original termination hadn't been about executive presence, it had been about silencing someone who might uncover their crimes and threaten their corrupt system. The evidence spoke with devastating clarity, destroying any possibility of innocent explanation or reasonable doubt about their criminal activities. Complete collapse happened faster than anticipated. Within hours of my evidence presentation, the board voted unanimously to involve federal law enforcement and terminate both Hamilton and Martin immediately with cause, stripping them of benefits. By Wednesday, FBI agents were carrying document boxes out of Northvale's offices. Local news ran footage of federal investigators interviewing employees and seizing computer equipment throughout the building, creating media spectacle. Hamilton Price resigned from all professional boards and hired a top criminal defense attorney. Several senior partners announced they were leaving to start their own firms, desperately trying to distance themselves from the growing scandal that threatened to destroy their reputations. Martin Doyle's downfall was more dramatic. I watched from the conference room window as federal agents escorted him out in handcuffs, his face pale and defeated. The same man who'd told me I'd never amount to anything was now facing years in federal prison for his crimes. Local business journals ran headlines about the Northvale scandal and multi-million-dollar embezzlement scheme. My name appeared in articles as the forensic auditor who'd uncovered systematic fraud, though I declined all interview requests to maintain professional dignity. Dana called that evening, her voice filled with vindication and relief. "Did you see the news? They're saying Martin might get 10 to 15 years if convicted on all counts. Justice finds people eventually. It just takes time sometimes and the right person willing to fight for truth regardless of personal cost." The regulatory fallout was swift and devastating. Northvale lost major contracts within days as companies rushed to distance themselves from the criminal organization. Most satisfying was knowing Hamilton and Martin's carefully constructed world had been brought down by the person they tried to destroy years earlier. 2 months later, I stood in that same glass office where Martin had destroyed my dreams. The irony wasn't lost. I now occupied the space where he'd once held absolute power over my future and career prospects. The board had asked me to meet about a lucrative consulting contract to help rebuild Northvale's financial controls and reputation. The compensation offered was more than I'd ever imagined earning as their powerless analyst years ago. "We desperately need someone with your expertise and integrity to help us move forward," Chairman Wilson explained. "Public trust must be rebuilt from the ground up, and you're the only person with credibility to lead that effort after exposing the truth." It represented everything I'd once dreamed of: executive authority, substantial compensation, and genuine respect from people who mattered in the business community. The promotion Martin had told me I'd never deserve was being offered. I listened to their proposal with the same calm attention I'd brought to audit work. They were desperate, offering more money and autonomy than I'd ever thought possible for someone from my background. When they finished their pitch, I closed my notebook and looked around the glass office one final time, remembering the humiliation I'd endured here. "Thank you for the generous offer, but I'm going to decline. I don't need your promotion anymore. I outgrew this place and everything it represents." The confusion on their faces was worth more than any salary they could have offered, a perfect ending to this chapter of justice. I walked out of Northvale Consulting for the final time with my head high and dignity intact. The marble lobby that had once intimidated me now seemed small and ordinary, just another office building full of people learning hard lessons about consequences. My phone buzzed with calls from firms wanting to hire the auditor who'd exposed the Northvale fraud. My reputation was established. I could write my own ticket anywhere now with clients seeking my expertise. But more importantly, I'd proven something no job offer could provide. I'd learned that worth isn't determined by other people's opinions or limited by their prejudices and attempts at intimidation. Martin Doyle had been sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. Hamilton Price was cooperating with authorities and would likely receive a lighter sentence for helping recover stolen funds and exposing additional corruption. Dana had been hired by a competitor at higher salary than she'd ever earned at Northvale, with full vindication of her courage and integrity. Justice hadn't just been served, it had been delivered with precision by someone they'd completely underestimated, proving that competence and determination ultimately triumph over corruption and privilege. I drove away from Northvale for the last time, knowing I'd never need to return. The chapter where other people defined my value was closed forever, replaced by self-determination and professional excellence. The future was mine to write, one audit at a time, helping other victims of corporate fraud find justice and redemption. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the playlist now.